excited. Portuguese frigate.
About 8, maybe 9 months ago, we were all raging about loot boxes. It felt like that's all AAA gaming was interested in last year. Definitely not the case this year in 2018. My name's Mike Williams. This is Gareth Evans.
Hey.
Apart from one or two exceptions at E3 this year, loot boxes were almost nowhere to be seen, right? They were pretty absent, I thought.
Yeah, and in the wake of all the loot boxes, anyway, everyone was talking about loot boxes last year. It was noticeable that they just nobody coming on stage demonstrating like for 30 minutes how you can buy loot boxes in your game, for example.
Right.
That was surprising.
Like Shadow of War, that was fun. So that's exactly the kind of thing that we want to talk about in this video, because it just feels like, obviously loot boxes are kind of a bit of a toxic brand at the moment. There are multiple countries trying to make them illegal, for example. So there's no surprise that people aren't shouting from the rooftops about them. But still, they were. It shows that things have changed a little bit already since Battlefront 2 happened last year. After Star Wars Battlefront 2, of course, let me remind you, EA DICE's multiplayer shooter, where the idea of multiplayer character progression, improving your character for online, that was tied to microtransactions and loot boxes, and that was massively controversial. We said while that controversy was panning out, while everyone knows what happened, we covered it thoroughly at the time, and we kind of knew at the time, we were saying this is going to have a big impact on the industry because of the sheer scale of the backlash, and the way that people were talking about it, and the way government agencies were coming forward and saying we need to take a look at this and stuff. As you mentioned at the top of the video there, Gaz, the Shadow of War developer stream last year, where they meticulously went through the awesome microtransaction loot box system that they had in that game, where they had that kind of orc shopkeeper just kind of rubbing his hands together.
Greedily rubbing his hands together in anticipation of your money.
Exactly. Became an icon of the loot box scandal. You had that last year. You had EA trying to look like the good guy at last year's E3, saying that all DLC and maps for Star Wars Battlefront 2 would be free because, as design director Niklas Fergraus said at the time, the main thing here is to keep the community together. Meanwhile, the company confirmed at the same time in the same interview that the game will offer microtransactions for people who want to speed up their progress. This is what Niklas Fergraus told GameSpot at the time. When you want to progress and get stuff, you can either play the game, and when you play, you earn the in-game currency, and with that, you can spend towards whatever you want. If you want to accelerate that, if you can't play for a week, you can purchase that. So that is them announcing at E3 last year that, basically the massively controversial loot box microtransaction system that it would, eventually turn out to be. Then you had Ubisoft speaking to GameSpot as well in the wake of last year's E3 and indicated there would be loot boxes in the upcoming multiplayer pirate game Skull and Bones. That was in August of 2017. This is what creative director Justin Farron said at the time. Quote, "Our economy emulates the real economy of the Indian Ocean. So things that are important to the people who are shipping goods, the merchants, the empires, those things are important to you. There's nothing more piratey than the treasure chest." But when pressed on whether or not that actually means microtransactions, he said it's early for that, before going on to talk about how much he spent on loot boxes in Overwatch. So he was kind of strongly indicating that there would be.
That's right.
But not confirming it at that time.
That was last year, right? And
that was last year. That was E3 2017.
And there's absolutely no talk this year. They didn't talk about how awesome treasure chests or loot boxes are this year. There's no talk of that at all, obviously, because of the backlash that happened with the whole EA thing. And that's just it just indicates the change in tone and how people are presenting their games now, because obviously it's in their own interest to show people, this is how we can take money off you. This is how loot boxes work. This is how fun they are, because we'll take loads of money off you by doing it. But people are cottoned on. People are more savvy now. I mean, the whole industry has changed because of this, and they're just not focused on it anymore because they will get the same backlash.
And like you say, it is massively reflected in this year's E3. EA, who are the offenders in chief, I guess, they're not talking about accelerated rewards this year. They're not talking about sense of pride and accomplishment. Now, instead, they're saying things like this. Now, this is from this year's E3 in contrast to what we've just been talking about. There is no ability to spend money on gameplay advantages at all in Anthem. That's BioWare executive producer Mark Darrah. Battlefield 5's E3 had this message on stage, which is no loot boxes, no premium pass. That was again later repeated in a tweet by the Battlefield 5 account on Twitter. Anthem also had a very similar no loot boxes, no paying for power thing. So this is a PR line. No loot boxes, no loot boxes, no loot boxes, no paying for power, no premium pass, no unfair advantages. That's the kind of messaging that's coming out of EA.
Constant reiteration.
Yeah. You also had the design director for Battlefront 2, Dennis Branval, admitting that they got it wrong, which is a thing we've been hearing a lot from EA over the last couple of months about Battlefront 2. So that is the stark contrast this year. There's no mention of loot boxes and stuff from Skull and Bones and stuff. I did try and dig as much as I could to try and see some conversation about it. I couldn't. I've not, to my mind, not seen anyone talking about them at all. I think, is it a surprise to you? Are you surprised to see it? I think it's kind of, I was expecting it, but at the same time, I was just kind of sitting in the office going, no one's mentioning loot boxes.
No, I mean, it's obviously a PR strategy. I mean, in the wake, which is so fresh, right? It only happened a few months ago, and this whole EA thing, they got so much criticism for it. They got so much bad PR. They had to defend themselves. They've had to come out and say, sorry, we're listening. In the wake of all of that, and because it's so fresh, it wouldn't make it'd be a PR disaster, a blunder to kind of stoke the fires in that way and turn the eye of Sauron on you, which you don't want, right, as a developer, as a publisher of games. So to avoid it completely this year, it makes a lot of sense, right? However, my question mark over all this is like, next year, will people still care?
Yeah, when they bounce back.
Yeah, when they end up releasing Skull of Bones, will we still care about it enough?
Yeah.
Or will people? Will enough news articles get written like they are doing right now, because it's a hot topic in the news, to dissuade them from putting loot boxes in?
Yeah, I think it is a question, and then it's not, loot boxes are not dead. That's not what we're saying. They still are very much alive. They might be dying, but they're still in some of the biggest games around. They're still in Overwatch. They're still in PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. They're still in Destiny 2. Still in Rocket League. Everyone loves Rocket League. They're in there, and they all kind of have some kind of random reward system in them, right? Which is what we're talking about here. Now Nintendo's Reggie Fils-Aimé is one person who's kind of spoken about loot boxes prominently in E3. Unlike EA, he's not saying that they're bad and that they've made mistakes and they're learning lessons. He said quite the opposite, hasn't he?
He definitely has, and he was speaking to Emily Chang at E3 during a Bloomberg. She's from Bloomberg, so it was an interview. And this was all like prefixed with the fact that Nintendo stock prices dropped 14%. So he's there trying to justify to the people who stockholders, the people who investors or whatever, trying to reassure the investors and say, Don't worry about Nintendo. We got this, because the criticism was that they didn't announce enough new IPs or enough new games at their showcase this year at E3. And that's why the share price for Nintendo has dropped 14%, which is like apparently the lowest place, the lowest it's been since September. So he was there trying to justify, trying to reassure people, and this is exactly what he said. Right, when asked about loot boxes, he says, "Loot boxes, broadly speaking, have gotten a bit of a bad rap. A game mechanic of buying something that you're not quite sure what's inside is as old as baseball cards, as an example. And so what we believe, for example, at Nintendo, is that gameplay mechanic that offers the consumer something to buy and they're not sure what's inside can be interesting, as long as that's not the only way you can get those items. And I think that's where some developers have made some mistakes, obviously referring to the backlash that some people have had there. And for us, it's one of the many mechanics that we can use to drive ongoing engagement in the game." So he's obviously aware of the backlash, because he says developers have made mistakes. But he is saying it's had a bad rap, right? Which means it had unjustified criticism.
Yeah, that is kind of what it sounds like, and I think it's interesting to hear him say that, because not many people are. It's quite a bold position to take, even if you think that. It's quite a ballsy thing to come out and say. So I don't know. Yeah, it's surprising to hear him say it. It doesn't surprise me that people in the industry still think they're a good idea after everything, because that's just the way it works.
What gets it about me is that he calls it an interesting game mechanic. That's fine. Interesting gameplay mechanic. That is great, right? And it drives ongoing engagement. If that is the case, just make them free. Not purchasable with real life money. Just make it in-game money, or just like randomly something like that, right? If that is why they want to have them in there, that makes a lot more sense. But it seems to me like that is like the guise. It's like, oh, this is interesting gameplay mechanic, guys. This is how we drive ongoing engagement. It's just putting out there as that's what it is, whereas really it's just a method of taking money off.
It's and with all of these games, like there's so many of the big games that we saw this year, like the Division, all these big titles, the Division 2, they were just kind of live services. Fallout 76, they're changing. Even Halo Infinite, you look at the Halo Infinite trailer and you think it's called Infinite, there's a lot of characters on the screen. Is it a live service?
Yes.
So everything's kind of moving towards being a live service, or so it seems.
Yeah.
How do they support that? They've got to support it somehow, and then they have been looking at loot boxes. Microtransactions are one way of doing it. The most popular way and the most successful way seems to be Fortnite, right? Yeah. Which is more of a direct microtransaction purchase. And there's a battle pass system as well. So if you subscribe to that, you're kind of, I don't mean literally subscribe, but if you kind of sign up for that, you're on this ladder of progression then where you can unlock more cosmetics and stuff as you play normally. So it's kind of this tier of just getting cosmetic stuff, and Fortnite is full of stuff. There's loads of characters in that don't affect the game.
Yes.
And it's still an even playing field, and that seems really popular. Interestingly, Marcus Carter, who's a lecturer in digital cultures at the University of Sydney, he told ABC News that developers have moved away from what he calls a slippery slope of freemium gambling-like mechanics in games, and that Fortnite is kind of the antidote to that, and that he thinks that is the way it's going to go. And he's just kind of a guy on the outside. He's just looking at it from the perspective of an academic, and that's the pattern that he's seeing. And I think he's right. I think that when something is as big and successful as Fortnite, other people will follow suit.
Yeah, they use that model going in the future, and you can see. I mean, Nintendo Switch launched Fortnite at E3, and they had 2 million downloads within the first 24 hours.
Day, yeah.
And obviously, it's a runaway hit, and this is a game that you don't even have to buy outright. So the only money that they're making is off the microtransactions, and they announced recently that they're ponying up $100 million for esports prize money this year in Fortnite.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can throw around that kind of money, you must be making an absolute min, right?
Yeah. So it seems to be a huge success for Fortnite. It is panning over to other games now. I mean, you look at Anthem, for example. Now that is one of these live service games as a service type games that's coming up, and that seems to be going down the Fortnite route, where there's cosmetics and stuff, and you just direct purchase cosmetics based on what you like the look of. The end. Like, you don't have to continually pump money into loot boxes to hopefully get the random drop that you want. You just buy the thing that you want, which is, I mean, that's much better, right, on the surface.
No, it seems like this is the natural way that the industry should react to what happened with the loot boxes. It's just completely just disregard loot boxes in the future and just allow people to buy, if they want to buy in extra content and skins and shit like that, just let them pay for what they get, and just don't add this random element into it. And Reggie's missed the base with me here. I think he's flat out, I don't want to say he's flat out wrong, but he's trying to justify loot boxes in a way, as in like they may be interested in progressing in that that way in future. And I feel for Nintendo, since the majority of their player base, or like the one platform, Nintendo Switch, one platform where that they have the highest number of like kid gamers and stuff like that. So I mean, that has serious implications for protect kids from gambling mechanics and stuff, and learning how to do all that in your brain. The feedback that you get from gambling, you're learning all that as a kid, and then I don't know, it's all very muddy. I don't want Nintendo to go down that route. Let's hope that they course correct and go like everyone else seems to be going down the route of, you pay for what you know what you're going to get.
Yeah. So that's the state of things at E3 2018, and it's just interesting how rapidly the gaming landscape can change from one year being all about loot boxes to the next year being complete, silence on the topic. Let us know what you think about this down in the comments below. Do you think loot boxes are dying? Are they on the way out, or are these companies just keeping it quiet and keeping the lid on it? Let us know what you think. Remember to like and subscribe if you happen to enjoy the video. There should be another video on your screens right now if you want to watch that, and a link to Patreon if you want to support the channel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.